Yes.
Welcome back, my brave and beautiful humans, to another episode of Soul Hygiene. I have our wonderful and gracious friend with us, Mr. Rob Scott, the forgiveness guy. And this will be his third time on the show. And I'm hoping we can make it a monthly thing, but both of us lead pretty busy lives. So we try to fit it in whenever we can. I know that I wanted him to be on this show um this month because I everyone goes through things. We all do. But I've kind of been dealing with something for about the last month and a half, and I had some questions that came across my mind and my heart and kind of meditated on them. And I thought the perfect person to try and give us some clarity on these questions that I'm having would be Mr. Rob. And I always appreciate his insight that he gives. And I think in the long run, these are questions that everyone has, or if you're searching for forgiveness or you're needing forgiveness or you need to give forgiveness, these are great starting points. So, I wrote these three questions down for Mr. Rob, and we're just going to jump right into it because I think it could turn into a lengthy discussion. We don't want it to be hours, but we'll definitely, if we can't fit it all in, we're going to, come back around and touch on it again in our next episode. So, welcome back to the show, Mr. Rob.
It is a pleasure to be here, TJ. Thank you
It's
very much
always
for
a
having
pleasure
me.
to have you here. I always appreciate you and the clarity you bring to the show and just to these questions on forgiveness. So I'm just going to jump right in because I
Absolutely.
really feel like the three questions. There's a lot to unpack here, and hopefully we can fit it all in. So I wrote them all down. The first one that we had talked about was, how do you approach a situation where you are seeking forgiveness from someone else?
That is a great question. And the first thing is you got to take responsibility. And a lot of people, who are wanting to receive forgiveness for the wrongs that they've done tend to, be in that mindset. And then it's a matter of contacting that person. And you may be estranged from them. Uh, you may not be, but it is reaching out and offering an apology, as simple as, I'm sorry, please forgive me. You don't have to make it complicated. We can get caught up in our emotions. Been there myself. It's like, is this person going to like just bash me over the head, for hurting them, way back when or, last week and that kind of stuff. And that's, internal voices. That's keeping you from doing what you need to do. So there's definitely going to be an internal battle, but the best way to do it is to come to the person with humility and go, I'm wrong. I'm sorry. I hurt you. Please forgive me. And whether they choose to forgive you or not is completely their responsibility. And
Yeah.
if they don't, that stinks for them. And it kind of stinks for you too, but stinks more for them. From a Christian background, there's this, you know, after the Lord's Prayer, it states very specifically, if you do not forgive, you will not be forgiven. It's a very conditional statement. So, uh, but if they do forgive you, that opens up the door for healing. Uh,
Right.
so,
So let's reverse it.
yeah,
What if um someone does something to you
right.
and you think they need to say sorry? Number one, I would not approach it that way. you know, because there's accountability and responsibility on both sides most of the time. But how would you approach someone who you feel has wronged you without coming at them with, you need to apologize to me, in an attitude?
Right. That's that's a great question. It's again, I would say approaching the person with humility and say, look, you may not have meant to do this, but what you did hurt me. And maybe you do know the intent that person really did intend to hurt you. Uh, but forgiving them, approaching them and saying, look, man, I forgive you. You know, you hurt me. I forgive you. Um, and continuing to forgive that person every time that they wrong you. Uh, when Jesus' disciples said, hey, how many times should I forgive my brother?
70
Seven
times.
times?
Yeah.
Yeah. It, I'm a bit of a nerd and calculated out what that would look like in a 24-hour period. Depending on how much you sleep, you would be forgiving your brother every 2.5 to 3 minutes. So forgiveness really is a part of our lives, or should be,
Hmm.
from a biblical standpoint. And the forgiveness that we receive as Christians, was given at the cross. It's already given. Whether we
Right.
accept it or not is on us, but that is already given. And in one of the passages where Jesus is talking to his disciples about, how many times he's supposed to forgive his brother, he says, if someone, says, I'm sorry, ask for forgiveness, you have to do it. And there's a legality aspect to it too. But, you know, if we are to be at peace and not hold on to stuff, we have to forgive. And I, being in the forgiveness business, I'm not 100% perfect at it, you uh, but I strive to do better every single day and learning how to communicate, in a way that is gracious and loving, uh, and also, having good boundaries. Like, I forgive you, let's move forward, but also being aware to have that communication about having
Right.
boundaries.
Yeah. Well, and I think that that has, for people like myself who struggled in the beginning of a trauma, or like for me being, you know, sexually assaulted, um, the forgiveness, it wasn't, I didn't have to humbly go before them. I had to forgive for me
Right.
because I was never going to get an I'm sorry.
Right.
So I learned very young how to forgive,
Hmm.
but it's still, when you go through life and it creeps up and someone, does something to you that breaks your heart or hurts you, there still comes a point where you have to step back and be like, okay, I don't want to be that angry person.
Right. Right.
you know? Um, so that leads into the next question I had was,
Well, can I
well, I guess, yeah, go ahead.
can I address like that kind of
Yes,
situation
please.
where you may not actually have an opportunity to uh, approach the person, or they approach you, they may even pass away. Uh, a lot of people will internally say, I forgive them, I forgive them. But what I have learned is spoken word is very
Hmm.
important. And speaking that out loud of, I forgive you. And the memories may come back, multiple times. Again,
Right.
speaking aloud, I've forgiven this person, and let go, move on. And you have to sometimes say that multiple times until it's no longer a charge for you.
I think that
But
was my next question.
oh,
Was
sorry.
no, 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 you're fine. It's no, that's perfect that you just led right into that, because I think, the question was, is it necessary to verbalize forgiveness to the person who wronged you, or can forgiveness be an internal process? I completely agree with what you said. Sometimes you have to just speak it,
Mhm.
like
I would
I
say every
always,
time. Uh,
yeah, and that's true. That's true. I would agree. I know for me, it's only sometimes because for me, it's during my meditation that I, you know, kind of am quiet and but in my head, I'm speaking, I forgive. I
mhm,
forgive because I'm going through the points of my exercise that help me, bring those
mhm,
things up and let them go. Um, but I think we were talking about earlier that going before someone with humility and verbalizing, I forgive you. And I think that brings me back to, I've watched some of the murder trials, right?
mhm,
A few of them where someone has killed their wife or their child, and they get up and they're like, I want you to know I forgive you. And that person who murdered their child breaks down in tears.
mhm,
Now, it doesn't take away their consequences, but it helps that person whose child died. And I think it opens up something within that convict's heart, you
mhm.
know? Um, so verbalizing it to the person or to the people, I think sometimes is a pathway to helping them. Um,
Yeah. Well, to to that point of, people who have been convicted of crimes and stuff, uh, in my studies, I don't remember the name of the study that uh, I'm citing here, so please forgive me, old age memory. No. But there was a study done of like 400 prisoners, and they wanted to find out, you know, how powerful forgiveness could be. They're looking at recidivism rate. And they found 400 prisoners whose victims were willing to meet with them and say, I forgive you. The convicts were apologetic, wanted to apologize, and the victims were willing to forgive. Just that statement. Uh, so they found them. They all went through that process. And the of the 400, I believe only one ever came back to prison, which is a huge, huge deal
right,
because, a lot of prisoners just kind of cycle in and out. But that forgiveness uh, aspect changed everything for the prisoners. They went on to lead better lives because so uh forgiveness, being able to speak to, the person is extremely powerful, not just for the victim, but also for the perpetrator too. Mm,
right, right. Well, and I think of, how God forgave me and how that changed me, you know. Um,
mhm,
if you look at that aspect of it on the on the religious aspect, if God can do that and he's within us, how our forgiveness can affect somebody else.
mhm,
So, yeah. Um, very insightful. I think the last question was in what ways can holding on to resentment or anger affect your mental and physical health? And I think we've touched on this before a little bit, but
mhm,
I know for me, when it took me a while to come to terms with the sexual assault and actually be able to forgive, it wrecked me emotionally, mentally, physically. Every aspect of my life was changed. But I also feel like even the most minute thing can be said, a bully, or, I was bullied for my weight for many years. Um,
mhm,
and that did change. that did change my mental aspect a little bit, you
Right.
know. Um, but I think that it has a profound effect,
Yeah,
uh, holding on to something, resentment, anger, whatever it may be, holding on to that and not letting go. It's
absolutely.
almost like your body is, for me, it was almost like my body was continually grieving.
Hmm. The anger, resentment, trauma, that, you know, brings up all of these emotions, kind of creates it. It absolutely impacts mental health, physical health. In fact, the CDC and Kaiser Permanente back in the 90s did a study called the Adverse Childhood Experience Test, and they followed 17,500 individuals, uh, and how they did or did not deal with trauma from their childhood. And they had a 10-question test that, they rated, and they found a direct correlation from the score to disease and mental health later in life, all the way up to cancer. So holding on to anger, resentment,
Yeah.
the traumas that you experienced, justifiable. I deal with justifiable anger all the time. Uh, that impacts your health. Like your body starts eating away at itself.
Yeah.
Uh, and mentally, you become acutely aware of small, infractions that other people, perpetrate on you that may
Right.
not have been intentional at all, but because you have this anger and this resentment about certain things, you see
You're hyper
things
focused. Yeah.
through that lens.
Yeah.
And and that impacts, how you function in a day-to-day basis. Having been, a super angry person growing up, rage was a nice way to describe me. Uh, like it's night and day difference. How you're able to interact with people, be able to step
Mm.
back and think clearly and process and go, okay, am I showing up as this younger version of myself with this defensive mechanism? I've got to be on guard.
Yeah.
Or is this person, trying to communicate the best they can? Not great, but they're trying to get the message across, and I can step back and receive that, and then also, hopefully, be an encouragement to communicate better. Or just say, look, you've crossed a boundary, and we need to reestablish this boundary, you know, in
Yeah.
our relationship.
So would you think that there is ever, how would I phrase this? That there's ever a time where forgiveness is not appropriate or possible? Because
Possibility
there,
is, you know, willingness.
right. And the reason I ask is because I had someone comment on a forgiveness post that I had put up one time, and they were like, I don't have to forgive. I don't have to forget. That is my choice. This is what I have to live with. You don't understand, you know?
Hmm.
And I responded with, you're right. It is your choice,
It is. It,
you know?
we don't
I
have,
feel, yeah, I feel sorry for them.
yeah,
Um,
and it will eat away at them for the rest of their lives. But we technically we don't have to forgive. It is a choice, and
yeah,
it is a choice that you know has consequences, good and bad, depending on what you choose to do.
right.
Uh, in in the anger, resentment. space, being a victim of rape and sexual assault or any kind of abuse, anything really, holding on to that anger. It, the way I like to describe it to my clients is like, okay, you got that anger. You're holding on to $100 bill in your fist. And God's over here, he's got the whole bank that he's wanting to give you, but you're holding this anger, this resentment, this
Mhm.
$100 bill going, this is my payment. And I'm going to hold on to it and missing out on the rest of life. And you cannot receive
Yeah.
positive things in your life, positive change, if you continue to live within a anger,
Yeah.
resentment, mentality, vibration, however you want to describe it, but that you're going to reject good things that are in your life or are coming into your life or have been in your life because of that anger.
I totally agree. Because I feel like there were times where, the 25 years where I just completed just this cycle of choosing the wrong person to be with who would mentally or emotionally, be abusive. Not, I don't know if it was at the time I knew it was a forgiveness thing
Hmm.
until, I was on that precipice and God was like, I forgave you. You need to forgive. And I was like, what am I forgiving? What do I need to forgive? I didn't feel like I did anything wrong. Like I didn't ask to be abused. I didn't ask to be raped. I didn't, but forgiveness wasn't for them. I wasn't going to go to the people who raped me and say,
Hmm.
hey, I forgive you, even though you're never going to say sorry. And I wasn't going to go to my ex-husband or the people that I was in a relationship with and be with, like, I'm going to forgive you, even though I didn't do anything wrong. You know,
Hmm.
it, it had to be an internal process for me where I was
Hmm.
like, I am going to forgive these people because I want to heal, because
Hmm.
I want a better life, because I don't want to be this person that I am right now.
Yeah.
And I think it's a conscious, like a conscious mindset switch. And some people, like for me, I didn't realize it for 25 years.
Right.
And when I did, I was like, okay, I'm not doing this.
Hmm.
But there's other people that I know who they don't get it. And
Yep.
even if you try to explain it, they're stuck with, I will not take accountability for something I didn't do. That's fine. I'm not asking you to take accountability for the action.
Hmm.
The accountability part, your responsibility is to you to forgive so that
Hmm.
you don't become an angry, resentful old person, when you get older.
Yep.
Um, and that's the way that I look at it, you know. I know people won't agree with me, but
Yeah. Well, someone once, yeah, s- said forgiving yourself is not in the Bible. Okay. And I would ask that person, what's the second greatest commandment?
mm,
And for those of you who are listening who aren't familiar, it's love your neighbor as yourself. So there's self love. And, if you love someone, you forgive them, which means you have to forgive yourself for what you're holding on to, for the beliefs you're holding on to. And, a lot of people who experience trauma tend to have, a life that never existed. This, white picket fence, house, all the stuff where rainbows and unicorns are abounding, and everyone is loving and no one hurts each other and that kind of stuff,
Hey, I still
because
believe unicorns are real, so
they're
I believe they
single
were in the
horn
Bible.
rhinoceroses.
Yeah,
uh
exactly.
Merriam-Webster back in the day.
They've
uh
evolved to rhinoceroses.
uh but that when people you know have this in the back of their mind, then this is how life should be, consciously or unconsciously.
Right.
Their lives, their actions strive to create that, control it. And, when anything does not match up, life becomes very stressful, depressing. You're angry because, this pattern of hurts that you experienced when you're younger continues later on in life. And why isn't everything just working out the way I envision it to be?
Right.
And so you don't live in reality. And so you have to forgive yourself for holding on to that, you know,
Well,
perfect picture.
and I think if
Yeah.
people look at it like whoever said that, forgiving yourself wasn't in the Bible, you know, God forgave us. And I think they're looking at it at from that aspect of God has already forgiven you, so you don't have to forgive yourself. But if you take the word forgiveness out of it, it's the basic bottom line word is accountability. You, okay, so I don't have to necessarily forgive myself, but I have to be accountable to myself.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
cannot be the person God created me to be if I'm holding on to things that are hurting me.
Yeah.
And that's
That's
the accountability that I think a lot of people who have struggled with victimhood and with traumas and are trapped in this never ending cycle is that you have to take accountability for yourself because the people who wronged you, the people who did things to you, are not
mhm.
going to. There is no closure, for most trauma victims, there's no closure. So holding on to it is only damaging you, your mentality, your spirituality, you know, that's all it's doing.
Relationships. Yeah.
Yeah, and your future relationships because I know for me like when I got into a relationship, my husband was damaged. And so we're two damaged people who don't know how to interact with another damaged person because we're already in ours.
Hmm.
So that's where like I would not know what to say and his responses were raw, lashing out and
Right.
in anger, and that created abuse. um but I think that if people would look at it differently, you know I mean, you and I are both testaments that if you really want to heal, you can.
Hmm.
If you want to change your life, if you don't want to be that person that your environment created,
Right.
right? Then you can heal.
Yeah. And,
It comes down to taking accountability.
and and you have to forgive. And forgiveness
Yeah,
breaks the cycle. It
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 does.
literally does. Physically, mentally, spiritually, it breaks the cycle.
I
Uh,
look at it like it when you don't forgive, when you don't take accountability, it's like you're wrapped in chains.
mhm. That's a great visual.
Yeah,
Great visual.
you're just wrapped up and you have this concrete thing, kind of like those monster movies, they're going to throw you in the ocean. Well, you're drowned in yourself. You
Yep.
can't swim because you're bound by this
Not,
anger,
yeah.
unforgiveness, you know?
Yeah. Not only that, but you've also got a backpack full of all the emotional
Yeah,
rocks.
yeah.
Uh,
I mean, you're
that,
not coming back up.
yeah. Uh,
And and that's where I think this generation is kind of stuck. They're all bound so tightly, but they want to stay there. because it gives them that attention. It gives them that, you know, some of them use their victimized mindset as almost like this is my life. There's nothing else. And if they're not a victim, how will people see me? They won't,
Right.
I'll just be in my little dark corner, but their trauma gives them a platform.
Right.
And I want people to understand that that's not a platform you want to be on.
Mm-mm.
Like, if you really truly want to get out of that victimized mindset, you have to break those chains. And the only way to break those chains is to take accountability for yourself, go through the healing, go through the therapy, whatever you need to do. Because I would think that those people who are watching you and giving you that platform for trauma would be so excited if you turned around one day and said, you know what? I'm in therapy, I'm healing, I'm not going to let this hold me down.
Yep. And some people absolutely will. Some
Yes,
people won't because misery loves company.
right.
And those people you kick to the curb because you need to move on.
You need to keep people in your life who are going to direct you in a positive manner.
Yep.
And I think so many people are surrounded by like-minded, victimized people. And I get it. I've been there. It's not just a word. People have had trauma and some more horrible than mine.
Hmm.
But there is hope. There is a way.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
just have to want it. And that's the whole thing. You have to want to be better and you have to want to heal. And I know for me, like, you know, it was accepting that I had the light of God within me
Hmm.
and God just speaking to me and telling me, look, you can't stay here. What are you
Yeah.
doing? You know, you have everything within you. And I never wanted you to go through all of this, but we can find blessings in all of it and
Hmm.
we can find a way through it. And that's where those chains are broken. Like the
Yep.
second, that third day, when I was in that mindset, in that realm of I don't want this life anymore. That third day when I was waking up from this darkness,
Hmm.
it was like I use the analogy of chains because it was like that. It was almost like they just broke and fell off,
That's awesome.
And I was able to breathe, and that
Hmm.
and fill my lungs with air and just worship and praise because I didn't have to be there. I didn't have to be there for 25 years. I
Hmm.
didn't have to make those choices. So the responsibility and the accountability I had to take was getting into those relationships, was making those choices, even though
Hmm.
in my own mind, I didn't think I had a choice,
Right.
but I did.
Hmm.
So, like I said, if you take the forgiveness word out, if that's some people don't like that, it all comes down to accountability. Forgiveness is accountability.
Yep. It it is. I would argue forgiveness forgiveness is a necessity.
It is. Yep.
Uh,
I completely believe I completely agree with you.
yeah.
Completely. Had I not forgiven the people who assaulted me or the 25 years that I went through these relationships, I would not be here.
Yeah.
I wouldn't. I
I
would have
believe
ended
you.
my life 5 years ago, or I would have begrudgingly stayed,
Hmm.
but I wouldn't be the person I am now.
I'm very
So,
glad he forgave.
yeah, and that's I had to verbalize it for years. Like you said, I had to verbalize it for years when I started my healing process. And now I don't have to verbalize it. because in my heart and in my soul, it's an automatic thing.
That's beautiful.
And it's an amazing, amazing feeling to have.
Yeah.
So, yeah, kind of brings tears to my eyes thinking about it. But yeah,
No.
how, wow, wow. I know you've had many experiences where um, you've had to use your forgiveness in your life that has gotten you to this point. You have one you want to share real quick before we?
Oh, I've I've had to forgive my father multiple times over and over again for continuing to unknowingly hurt me, and how in the actions that he has demonstrated the patterns, yeah, throughout life. And he wasn't aware. He was doing the best he knew how. Uh, but I've had to forgive him for that, for how he made me feel, you know, like I was the last, person in his life, the last, and that kind of stuff. And it's been challenging. And at one point I had to say, look, I have to step back to really do some work. I had to set up some boundaries because
Yeah,
uh, there was there needed to be some boundaries set in place where I didn't have any. And that's another thing about this whole process is, you know, if you're going to go back to the same thing over and over and over and over again, that's not healthy either.
right,
Boundary, forgiveness, improvement, you know, and setting good boundaries is important.
right.
And so I encourage people, to continue to forgive even when it hurts and it's painful. It opens up opportunities for new relationships, and you get to choose what you do. You get to set the boundaries. And
I think our next show we're gonna have to talk about boundaries.
yeah,
I think that's a very good topic because I know for me, I think we were talking before we started recording. It's hard for me,
mhm,
and I don't want to get into that all right now. But yeah, I think our next show, I think a lot of people struggle with that,
yeah,
or they're on the other end and they're shut off. So
been there
it's
too.
yeah, it goes both ways. So we're definitely next month we're gonna have to do a show on boundaries, and
Sounds good.
I think that'll be an amazing show. So thank you so much for joining us again, Mr.
It's my
Rob.
pleasure.
And thank
My
you everyone
pleasure.
for joining us again for another episode of Soul Hygiene. We'll see you later.